5 o'clock in the morning, the 27th of November, 1810. A chimney sweep is knocking at the door of number 54 Berners Street, London, because a letter asked him to come. The letter was a lie. By nightfall, this one quiet street will be jammed solid with every tradesman, every doctor, every duke and dignitary the biggest city on earth can produce. All of them summoned, all of them fooled, all of it the work of a single man with a pen. This is the Berners Street Hoax. And the best part is not how it worked. The best part is who wrote it, and what the writing eventually cost him. The maid who answers the door tells the sweep there has been some mistake. No sweep was sent for. He shrugs and disappears into the dark. Chimneys wait for no one. 10 minutes pass. Another sweep knocks. Same answer. Another. By the time the sky over Marylebone turns grey, 12 of them have stood on that doorstep, brushes over their shoulders, each clutching a polite written request from the lady of the house. A lady who has written to nobody. Her name was Mrs Tottenham. And upstairs, still in her nightclothes, she was about to become the most famous woman in London for reasons she would never fully understand. The sweeps were only the overture. Across the city, wagons were already being loaded with coal she hadn't ordered. Ovens were already warm with wedding cakes she hadn't asked for. And the Morning Post, the fastest information network on the planet in 1810, was still carrying hundreds more letters with her name signed neatly at the bottom. A word about that city, because the scale matters. London in 1810 held roughly 1 million people, the largest city humanity had ever built. Gas lighting was so new that people strolled down Pall Mall after dark just to stare at the lamps. And the post was its nervous system. Inside town, the Twopenny post collected and delivered as many as 6 times a day, so you could invite a friend to dinner at breakfast and hold his reply before noon. Honestly, there are days when I suspect my university email moves slower. Berners Street itself sat just north of Oxford Street. Quietly respectable, favoured by painters and architects, the sort of address where the loudest daily event was a muffin seller's bell. That November, the papers had room for only one story. King George III, grieving the loss of his youngest daughter, Amelia, had slipped once more into the illness that would take his mind for good, and Parliament was quietly drafting the plans that would hand power to his son. London was tense, distracted, glued to the news, which made it, when you think about it, the perfect audience. Enter the author of the whole affair, Theodore Hook, 22 years old and already one of the most dangerous dinner guests in England. His father wrote songs for the Vauxhall pleasure gardens, and the boy inherited the music and doubled the mischief. At 16, he had a comic opera running at Drury Lane. By 20, he could sit at a piano, take any subject the room shouted at him, and improvise an entire song about it. Verses, rhymes, tune, the lot, right there on the spot. It was said that even Coleridge compared his genius to Dante's. Talent like that is a marvelous thing. Talent like that, bored, is a hazard. The story goes that one afternoon, Hook was walking down Berners Street with a friend. Most tellings name him as Samuel Beazley, an architect with a weakness for the theatre. When Hook stopped, pointed at a perfectly ordinary house, and offered a bet. 1 guinea said he could make that address within a week, the most talked about house in all of London. A guinea, for scale, was roughly a working man's wage for a week. Why number 54? Why Mrs Tottenham? Nobody knows. As far as anyone can tell, she was simply there. I do feel for her. Nobody asks to become a landmark. What he did next took weeks. Night after night, by candlelight, letters, by most estimates somewhere around 4,000 of them, in different hands, in different tones, each one a small forged masterpiece. Requests for goods, appointments for services, invitations, summonses, pleas. Everyone signed from 54 Berners Street, and everyone seemingly matched to its natural hour. Sweeps at first light, because that is when sweeps work. Deliveries rolling through the morning, and the grandest visitors timed for the largest possible audience. Sit with that number for a second. 4,000. By hand, before the typewriter, before carbon paper, before mercy. And here I'll show my hand. People love to file this away as harmless fun, the greatest prank ever pulled. I'm not so sure. Hook gambled a stranger's peace, a whole street's livelihood, and one blameless woman's name for a guinea he didn't even need. To me, that's not wit. That's mischief with victims. If you're on my side of that argument, tap the like and stand with me and Mrs Tottenham. If you think I'm being a humorless old professor about the finest joke of the 19th century, the comment section is your courtroom, and I promise I'll read the case for the defense. Dawn on the day itself, and the sweeps were only the first drops of the storm. Behind them came the coal, wagon after wagon, rumbling in from the wharves, iron tires grinding on cobblestone, drivers shouting for space that did not exist. Behind the coal, the cakes, enormous wedding cakes, boxed and ribboned, carried by bakers' boys, promised a grand celebration at number 54. Behind the cakes, fishmongers with baskets of cod still smelling of the Thames tide, brewers rolling barrels, boys bent under sacks of potatoes, cobblers with boots, drapers with cloth, every one of them holding a letter, every letter a fake. By mid-morning, Berners Street stops working as a street. Carts lock wheel to wheel, horses stamp and steam in the cold air. A dozen pianos, a dozen, arrive on separate drays from separate showrooms, and somewhere behind them, 6 burly men are inching a full-sized organ toward a doorway it will never, ever fit through. 6 men, 1 organ, 3 front steps. I would have paid good money to watch that negotiation. It gets stranger. Doctors begin arriving, one after another, each summoned to attend a lady of the house said to be gravely ill. Lawyers appear with papers, ready to draft her will. Clergymen come, prayer books in hand, to comfort her through what the letters called her final hours. And at some point, this detail always draws a gasp from my students. An undertaker knocks, tape measure ready for a funeral that existed only in ink. Mrs Tottenham, very much alive, watches it all from her own window like a woman trapped inside somebody else's dream. Think of her for a moment. She has done nothing. She knows no one who would do this. And the knocking simply does not stop. The tradesmen were the flood. The dignitaries were the punchline. Because Hook hadn't written only to bakers and sweeps, he had written upward. A letter, precisely worded, for each of the grandest men in the kingdom, each offering exactly the bait that particular man could not refuse. And they came. The governor of the Bank of England came. The chairman of the East India Company came. A royal duke, the Duke of Gloucester, reportedly rolled up in his carriage. Even the Archbishop of Canterbury appears in the tellings, though I'll be honest with you, every retelling of this story adds one grander name, and on the Archbishop I keep a little doubt in my pocket. About the Lord Mayor of London, though, there is no doubt at all. His carriage pushed into that chaos. He took one look at the wreckage of his morning, and he drove straight on to the public office at Marlborough Street to demand that somebody, anybody, hunt down the author of this outrage. The city's chief magistrate, personally pranked by post. There is something almost operatic about it. And here is the detail I genuinely cannot get past. Those letters worked. Somewhere, a 22-year-old sat down and composed the one page that gets the governor of the Bank of England out from behind his desk and across London on a working morning. I have tried to draft that line in my head for years, and I cannot make it convincing. If you can write the 2 sentences that would have fooled you into that carriage. Put your version below, because I want to read the letter that beats the bank. Restoring order fell to a system that barely existed. London in 1810 had no police force as we would recognize one. The Metropolitan Police were still 19 years away. What it had were Bow Street officers and parish constables, and they did the only thing they could. They blocked both ends of Berners Street and began turning people away, one bewildered tradesman at a time. It hardly helped. The letters had been timed in waves, and the waves kept coming until dark. Dusk fell early, the lamplighters working their way up between the stranded wagons, and still the knocking went on. Softer now, confused, like an echo that hadn't been told the joke was over. All day, directly across the road, a curtain twitched. Hook had rented a room opposite number 54, the best seat in the house for a show only he knew was playing. He and his companion watched an entire city fold itself into one narrow street. The shouting, the trampled cakes, the cod sliding into the gutter, the pianos going nowhere at all. He had wagered a guinea that he could make this the most famous address in London. Down in the crowd, nobody was arguing. The laughter curdled fast. Tradesmen had lost a full day's earnings, and in some cases, the goods themselves. In a city where a baker's ruined stock could mean a family's ruined week, this was not a victimless joke, and the newspapers said so loudly. The story ran everywhere, which of course was precisely the prize Hook had been playing for. Fame was guaranteed. The only open question was whether a name would be attached to it. In print, in a courtroom. Suspicion found him almost immediately. Hook was the obvious author. Everyone in his circle knew the flavor of his mischief. But suspicion is not proof, and proof never arrived. No confession, no witness willing to swear, no letter traced to his hand. And Hook, displaying the impeccable timing that made him famous at the piano, suddenly discovered an urgent concern for his health and took a long restorative trip to the countryside until London found something else to talk about. He was never charged. He never paid a penny. Whether he ever collected his guinea, history does not say. I honestly don't know whether to be appalled or impressed. Most days, I manage both before breakfast. Here is where the story should end. It doesn't, because the strangest chapters of Theodore Hook's life were still ahead of him, and the post office was not finished with him, nor he with it. First came the reward, not punishment, reward. His improvisations had made him a favorite of the Prince Regent's glittering circle. The future George IV reportedly wept with laughter at his after-dinner performances, and princes like to pay for what amuses them. In 1813, that favor turned into something solid. A plum colonial post on the island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean as treasurer. A job worth around £2,000 a year, a fortune handed to a prankster in his mid-20s with no training in accounts whatsoever. What could possibly go wrong? For a few years, nothing did. Hook threw parties under the palms, charmed the garrison, and treated the treasury with all the attention you would expect from a man whose real gift was rhyming on demand. The climate suited him wonderfully. The bookkeeping, rather less. In 1817, an audit found a hole in the accounts, roughly £12,000, simply gone. The money, as best historians can tell, had been quietly siphoned off by a subordinate over the years, while Hook signed papers he barely read. It didn't matter. His name was on the office. He was arrested on the island, shipped back to England under guard, and held answerable for every missing penny. The man who had once flooded a street with false paper was undone by ledgers he never bothered to open. History does have a sense of humour. It is just not always kind. The Crown pursued him for the full sum for the rest of his life. For a stretch of the 1820s, he was even confined for the debt. Not a dungeon, but a shabby detention house where debtors lived in limbo, receiving visitors, writing furiously, going nowhere. And write furiously he did. Because the second act of Hook's life was, improbably, a triumph. In 1820, he became the founding editor of John Bull, a Sunday newspaper with sharp teeth and enormous sales, feared across political London for its wit, most of it pouring straight from Hook's pen, often overnight, often improvised exactly the way he had once improvised songs. His novels followed and sold in stacks. He earned sums most writers of the age could only dream about. He spent more, always more. Dinners, wine, company, appearances. The performance of Theodore Hook was the most expensive show in town, and the ticket price was Theodore Hook. The writers who dined with him could not resist bottling him. When Thackeray needed a professional wit for Vanity Fair, he sketched Hook into the character of Mr. Wag. Disraeli borrowed him too, as Lucian Gay in Coningsby. Which means, in a quiet way, Hook has been hiding inside English literature for nearly 2 centuries, a fictional guest at fictional tables still singing for his supper. The real man wore out. Decades of deadlines, debts, and long candlelit nights take their toll, and by the summer of 1841, the performance was over. The end came for him that August at his house by the river in Fulham. He was 52. The Crown still owed its £12,000, moved in and took what little remained. The most entertaining man in England left the stage with empty pockets, and one last trick already in the mail. A year earlier, in 1840, Britain had just invented something world-changing, the penny black, the first adhesive postage stamp. And someone, the evidence points squarely at Hook, celebrated by playing one small perfect joke on the postal service itself. He drew a caricature of post office clerks, by hand, on a card. He stamped it, and he posted it to himself. That little act of nonsense is now recognized as the oldest known postcard on Earth. When it surfaced at auction in 2002, it sold for more than £30,000. The cheek of it. 30 years after Berners Street, and he still could not leave the post alone. I find that almost unbearably fitting. The prank that opened his legend and the keepsake that closed it, both of them, in the end, just letters. You can still stand where all of it happened. Berners Street runs just off Oxford Street, 2 minutes from the crowds, and I've walked it myself on a quiet Sunday, narrow enough that you feel you could cross it in 8 good steps. Where number 54 stood, a gleaming luxury hotel rises today, and guests wheel their suitcases over the very ground where 12 sweeps once queued in the dark. There is no plaque. London, a city that commemorates almost everything, has chosen to stay quiet about the morning it was fooled. And Mrs. Tottenham? She slips out of the record almost as suddenly as she was dragged into it. No memoir, no interview, no revenge. Just a name on 4,000 forged letters, and then silence. Of everyone in this story, she is the one I would most like 10 minutes with. Why did it work so completely? Because Hook understood something about systems that most people in 1810 did not. Trust is infrastructure. The post functioned because everyone believed a letter meant what it said. A signature was identity. A request was intent. Nobody checked, because checking would have broken the machine. Hook didn't pick a lock. He walked through a door the whole city had agreed to leave open, 4,000 times. If that mechanism sounds familiar, it should. Swap the paper for pixels and the Twopenny post for your inbox, and Berners Street becomes the first recorded mass phishing attack. Every trick in a modern scammer's toolkit already present in 1810. The forged sender, the tailored bait, the urgency, the timing. We didn't invent the con, we just gave it broadband. To me, that is the genuinely unsettling part of this story. Not the pianos. The proof that a confident lie, well addressed, can move a city. London learned the lesson slowly. In the weeks that followed, reports rippled through the papers of smaller imitation hoaxes around town, as every bored young man with ink and poor judgment tried his hand. None came close. Berners Street stayed singular, partly through sheer scale, and partly, I suspect, because it had the one thing the copies lacked: a genuine artist behind it. That is not a compliment exactly, but it is the truth. 2 centuries on, I still cannot decide what Berners Street actually is. A comedy, obviously. Nothing with 12 chimney sweeps in it can avoid being a comedy. But look again, and it becomes a warning, written in a beautiful hand, about fame and what people will spend to get it, about systems and how politely they can be broken, about a brilliant young man who treated the whole world as his audience and never quite noticed the cost of the tickets. He fooled a street with paper, and in the end, paper, ledgers, debts, deadlines quietly fooled him back. That is the story I wanted to hand you today. And if you've walked the whole length of Berners Street with me, thank you, genuinely. This channel, Arthur's Living History, is just me, one professor with too many books and a lifelong weakness for mornings like that one. If you'd like to keep wandering into the past together, the subscribe button is where you leave your coat. Before you go, tell me below which of those 4,000 letters would have caught you. I have a suspicion about myself, and it involves cake. And if there's a forgotten corner of history you'd like me to walk into, name it, because I choose my roads by reading yours. Theodore Hook cheated the post out of one honest day, and the post, patient as ever, delivered him to posterity. If you liked the video, make sure to drop a like and check out the video on the screen.